Hi everyone, I'm Jack the Rambling Raconteur, and I hope that you're doing well. I'd like to share a few thoughts on Ronde by Arthur Schnitzler. This play is incredible. It scandalized audiences when it was first performed, some 20 years after it had originally been written and Schnitzler had privately published the play. Perhaps audiences had some sense of the plot, some intimation of what to expect when they first saw it staged in the aftermath of the absolute horror and carnage of World War I, and yet it still shocked them. The way that Schnitzler was exposing a culture that no longer existed. Austria-Hungary was gone. The Habsburgs were gone. The old Europe had been erased by World War I, and yet Schnitzler poked holes at something that perhaps had never even been there. And it's perhaps best exemplified by a statement that the Count makes towards the end of the play, when he says, "Happiness, pardon me, Fraulein, but there's no such thing. In general, it's precisely the things that are talked most about, which don't exist. For example, love. That's another one." And this idea that the culture, that happiness, love, none of that existed. That certainly people didn't feel happy in the aftermath of World War I's horror. They didn't, that they felt the loss from love, but they didn't feel happy. But to then have Schnitzler go in and say, hey, some of the folks who were leading us didn't think any of that was there, just shocked audiences. Even more though, was the idea that class divisions were the class divisions that were changing in the aftermath of revolution and war. Those class divisions perhaps hadn't ever quite been there either. Because what occurs in La Ronde, sometimes referred to by its German title Reigen, or round dance, or Rondel, is a sense of characters changing places and lovers throughout a dance. And that metaphor is referred to at one point when two characters do actually go to a cotillion, but what occurs are 10 scenes, and in each scene there are two characters who have some type of afternoon or evening together in which they consummate the act. And it's very clear that this occurs because there's what leads to it, and then there's this line break, and then there's the short conversation, the disappointment inevitably afterwards in each scene. And as the characters interchange their lovers from one to another almost immediately, we also have class barriers breaking down. We start towards what in Schnitzler's mind, in the Viennese, theater-going public's mind, would have been the lowest end of the social, hierarchy, with a prostitute. Sometimes in some titles, she's called a whore, the sex worker, that she's there, and she's the first person we hear from. In a sense, she's the first voice that Schnitzler gives us from Vienna, is someone that Vienna knew existed but didn't want to talk about. "Come here, my handsome angel." A soldier turns around, then continues on his way. "Don't you want to come with me?" "Ah, so I'm the handsome angel?" "Of course, who else? Go on, come with me. I live just down the road." "I don't have time. I must get to barracks." "You'll still get back to barracks in good time. It's nicer at my place, though." "That may be." And we don't actually see her place. We don't see her place until the very last scene of the play. And so from this, the prostitute and the soldier, we have their quick interaction down beside beneath a bridge beside the Danube. And then from there we shift to a soldier who's out dancing with a chambermaid and trying to have some type of, night with her. And one of the things Schnitzler does is he repeatedly shows that the men in this Viennese society are absolutely awful. And it's not just that they're trying to seduce women and trying to essentially get an evening with them, and then as soon as they can, they're out. He reveals that, but he also has the women saying to the men, "You're so arrogant. Why are you saying this to me? You are wicked." For the most part, these men are not something to be looked up to or to be appreciated. And he doesn't just show that with a soldier. So he takes each of the paragons of what would have been the old European culture. He has a soldier, he has a poet, he has a young gentleman, he has a working class, middle class husband who seems to have some job and a house. He has a count, he has the nobility. And so he has all these different aspects of Viennese culture, and he reveals each of them to be hollow, to be these individuals who just are bereft of any of the characteristics of nobility that should be appreciated. And then from the women we have, as I said, we start with the sex worker at the beginning. Then we have a chambermaid who's seduced by the soldier in the second scene. She in turn is seduced by the young gentleman, the son of the woman whose house she works in. He then finds time for a young wife who finally spends time with her husband. And that scene is one of the most crucial, because it seems to be one where Schnitzler, having shown all of these different pillars, these archetypes of the old European nobility and demolished each of them, he at one point goes into the family now and says, okay, perhaps all you've been seeing isn't what it's cracked up to be. Maybe it's the home and the family. That's where we should have. And the dialogue between the husband and the young wife is just absolutely shattering, because while the actress and the count reveal that hollow, almost nihilistic side of the fin-de-seicle culture, the young husband and the young wife reveal a very different side. In a sense, the way that one finds happiness through compromise. So we have them say, the husband says, because otherwise marriage would be something less than perfect. It would be, how shall I say, it would lose its sanctity. Oh, believe me, it is so. If in the 5 years we've been married we hadn't occasionally forgotten we're in love, we would no longer be so. That's too lofty for me. As it is, we've had perhaps 10 or 12 love affairs, all with each other. Doesn't it seem like that to you as well? I can't say I've been counting. If we'd savored our first one to the very dregs, if we'd surrendered to my passion for you from the very start, we'd have fared no better than a million other couples. Our relationship would be over by now. Ah, so that's what you think. Believe me, Emma, for the first few days of our marriage, I was afraid that's what would happen. Me too. You see, wasn't I right? That's why now and then it's good to live as just good friends together. I see. And the husband goes on and on about this idea that he takes his pleasure with his wife in small doses, that he doesn't want to burn through the happiness of their marriage, that they periodically honeymoon together. They have times where they're just friends. They have times where they're compromised in this life of being dull and just getting by. But then they fall back in love, and it's wonderful again. And there's a truth to that. There is a truth, having been married for nearly 10 years now. I think when this video goes up, I'll have been married for just about exactly 10 years. There is a truth to the sense that there are highs and lows within a relationship, within a marriage, that you're finding that. But to suggest that the compromise is what makes it all work, that neither of us is really particularly happy most of the time, but every now and then it allows us to spark back into love. It's just a very bitter and sad way to live. And that is perhaps the most heartbreaking of the scenes across here. It's quite heartbreaking to see the men seduce women and then essentially just leave them and almost forget about them. They're already thinking about who's the next woman I'll be with. And that is vicious and toxic. But to see that the core of the play, in a sense, the true middle of the play is this couple, and to see the way that where their marriage is at is just heartbreaking. They go on to have this discussion where the husband is talking about, the women who engage in affairs, like they just keep falling down and they deserve what they get. There's an irony there that I'll describe in a moment. He goes, I wouldn't say that. I don't only mean material poverty, of course. There is also, if I may say so, such a thing as moral poverty, a deficient sense of what's permissible, and most especially of what is noble. Mind, this is one of the men who is not noble. We do have characters who are noblemen in here, and who are wealthier than this man is, but he's not. He's acting as though he aspires to something that he doesn't quite grasp, but then wants to denigrate everybody else for falling from that when they perhaps never had it themselves. But why should they be pitied? They have quite a good life after all. You have some curious notions, my dear. Don't forget such riches are doomed by nature to fall lower and lower. There is no stopping them. Evidently, they quite enjoy falling. And the irony is that in the previous scene, we saw the young wife gradually fall into a seduction with the young gentleman who had previously, of course, seduced his mother's chambermaid. And the young wife and the gentleman have already made a plan to not only dance together the next night, but to see each other again. And then the husband has no idea as he's pontificating about the dull aspects of their relationship that allow them to regain some sparks. He has no idea that the previous night his wife has, enjoyed a spark of her own. She goes, well, about these wretched creatures. She goes, what's got into you? Well, I've asked you often enough, ever since the very beginning, in fact, to tell me all about your youth. And so she starts to demand from him, well, do you know about these? And he goes, he refers to them as ladies. He goes, don't use the word ladies. It is you who are holy. But you must answer me one question. Otherwise, no more honeymoon. The way you talk, kindly remember, you're a mother, and it's a little girl asleep through there. But I'd like a boy as well. Emma, don't go on. Don't be such of course I'm your wife. But I also want to be your lover occasionally, too. Well, first my question. Well, was a married woman one of them? Well, what do you mean? I would like to know whether that is such women do exist. I know, but whether you, and he starts to explain, do you know any such woman? Why, I wouldn't know myself. Are there any such women among your friends by any chance? Well, how can I confirm that ever for certain or deny it? And he can't imagine his wife being a woman who's had an affair. He has to think it's one of her friends, and then he makes her promise never to associate with these women, little knowing, of course, what has already occurred. And so their relationship at the core of the play is quite shattering. Another feature throughout the play is the sense that the characters are constantly changing. It literally was a round dance as a play, that they were shifting dancing partners, and then, of course, having a few minutes aside privately with those dancing partners. But as that's occurring, there's also the sense that they're putting on costumes and masks. One character, the poet, demands that his lover, who's a sweet maid, just a young woman, that she refer to him by his stage name. That's perhaps not even his stage name. Whereas when he's spending the night with the actress, he wants her to use his first name, Robert. And that there's this sense of masks dropping. Characters will see a character's eyes, and the Count, for example, notes that the eyes of the prostitute remind him of someone. They remind him of some other woman that he was in love with. Another character will refer to Fritz, and well, who's Fritz? Who is Fritz? I'm not Fritz. Or Franz, who's Franz? And there's a jealousy that exists here, as if Schnitzler is saying, yes, we find these moments of happiness, but if we're always thinking about what's next and who's next and where my pleasure lies, not just in this moment, but in the future, we are, in a sense, surrendering our happiness. So the poet and the actress have one as well, where she says, well, who are you being unfaithful to this very moment? Not to anyone as yet, unfortunately. Console yourself. I'm being unfaithful to somebody too. I can well imagine. And who do you suppose it is? Well, my love, I really wouldn't have any idea. Come on, guess. Let me see now. Well, your director. My dear man, I'm not a chorus girl. Well, it was just an idea. Have another guess. Let me think. You're being unfaithful to your colleague, Benno. That man isn't interested in women at all. Didn't you know? He's having an affair with his postman. I don't believe it. Well, anyway, give me a kiss. Characters periodically, there's this just list of, it's a game. It's just, this dance is just a game. And I think in the aftermath of World War I, there were people who felt that they were realizing it had always been a sense of a game for others, and that they didn't find it to be a game anymore. That there was a true sadness, a loss, that Schnitzler was never quite pushing forward to the forefront, but it was at the back of everyone's minds, both when he wrote it at the end of the century and when it was performed. And then so the play continues through a final cycle where the last scene has the Count, who has allowed himself to be seduced in the morning by the actress after his long statement about enjoyment, intoxication. Fair enough, one can't fault that. It's something certain. Supposing I'm enjoying, very well, I know that I'm enjoying. Or suppose I'm intoxicated, fine. That too is something certain. And when it's over, well, it's over and there's an end of it. It's over. But as soon as one, how should I put it, as soon as one refuses to surrender to the moment, begins to think that is about before and after, well, then it's quickly over. Before is sad, and after is uncertain. In short, one only gets confused. Don't you agree? You've understood the way things are, all right. This Count's final night is waking up and trying to decide whether or not he needs to leave some money on the toilet. In the apartment of the sex worker, the room that we didn't see in scene 1, but we are now starting scene 10 in. And so we've come full circle where he was the last character we were introduced to, and we now see that he's spent the night with the first character, the first person whose words we heard. And so he's trying to decide, I can't remember, did we actually do anything last night? Should I leave money? I suppose I have to. And he has this whole monologue where he's stumbling around and knocking things over. Light and dark is critical, where there are characters who don't want to be seen when they undress. Or lights go out and then a character will say, hey, relight the candle. I need to be able to see you. Or close the curtains. We'll pretend it's nighttime. But here he's just bumbling around. It's dawn. He doesn't know what's going on. He can't remember what happened. And the woman asks him, did you want to do anything? And he has one last of those epiphanies where he sees her eyes and he sees someone else, someone that he felt a deep emotional connection to, but he can't bring himself to say the name. And as he leaves, she reminds him, also, you need to tip the chambermaid on your way out. The porter's gone, so you don't need to tip him. And so we're given one last suggestion that perhaps the Count and Chambermaid will be next to partner off in the round dance. So if you've never read the play, I highly recommend it. There's a great adaptation of it from, I want to say, the 1950 by Max Ophüls, Ronde. Criterion released it. It's absolutely incredible. The performers are fantastic. The photography is incredible. And the way that they have each scene shifts. There's a character on a merry-go-round, on a carousel, who's there. And he really gives this added touch, this magical touch to what was going on. Additionally, Schnitzler is probably equally famous for the famous story, Dream Story, which was adapted in part by Kubrick for Eyes Wide Shut, if you're familiar with that. Another one that I was reminded of were, of course, the stories of Guy de Maupassant. Another aspect to this, not quite free love, but this sense of romance that was night by night, day by day, would have been that people would contract STIs. And for Viennese audiences in particular, an archduke had died from syphilis at the very beginning of the 20th century. And so that would have been in people's minds. And so the stories of Guy de Maupassant come close. Certainly, Ophüls in another project filmed Les Plaisirs, which was a triptych of tales by Guy de Maupassant. And I'll link a video I did on those three stories, in particular The Mask, Madame de Tellier's Establishment, which has a group of men who from a town who come from all sort of aspects of the town together and realize that the brothel's closed because they've all gone off on a country holiday for an important spiritual purpose. And then finally, The Model, which I think is probably the story that gets closest to what Schnitzler was doing. That was also filmed, though, by Ophüls, and it's an incredible film. In particular, one scene in the third story is just incredible. Like Death by Maupassant is another story that would be close. Thinking about that Viennese culture, Stefan Zweig comes to mind. Probably the novel Beware of Pity, some of his novellas, stories as well. The Sleepwalkers by Hermann Broch. This is a great one as well. And I'll link my videos on these first two books as well. Freud was a huge fan of the play. Certainly the way that it revealed the almost obsessive nature of physical love, of romance, of sexuality that it was getting at. His lectures probe a very similar vein in a very different avenue. I was also reminded by Laughable Loves by Milan Kundera, in a sense, a series of stories about people falling in and out of love in Prague and Brno, in Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia in the 1960s. These Ars Amatoria by Ovid from the erotic poems, that certainly comes through. Henry Green's Party Going, I think, is very close. There's a whole group of folks on a train heading out, trying to leave a party, get to their next place they're going to, and the fact that there's all these affairs going on around them. But this is one that's close, and that is told almost entirely through dialogue. So that gives another sense that's even more close to the stage. Hugo and Hoffmanstahl would have been part of the Viennese culture as well. My favorite work from him is the Lord Chandos Letter. Dancing in the Dark by Janet Hobhouse is sort of an update to the 1970s of this type of pseudo-hedonism, folks feeling like they have to seize the moment only to realize that the moment was never even there for them to grab. And I would add the plays of Harold Pinter. There's a sense of a tragic comedy, this idea that there are scenes that are shattering and yet are also making everyone sort of smirk with the irony and the sense of foolishness that the playwright has for certain characters. And so Harold Pinter would be one, probably Homecoming. So please let me know if you've read Schnitzler, if you have other works from him that you enjoy, and I hope everyone's doing well. Have a good one. Thank you.